Greetings world. We are anonymous. There have been many protests all over the world on a large scale since the beginning of the 24-hour news cycle prevalence of the internet, and it has become obvious that some quickly gain favored status from the mainstream media while others are kept in the dark regardless of size or significance. This selective hyper-focus on particular protests is a key component of the color revolution strategy. The protesters are positioned as the downtrodden masses yearning for their voices to be heard, and Bad Country of the Month's leadership is oppressive and needs to go. Sometimes this works, Ukraine twice in Georgia, and other times it fails, Russia and for now at least Venezuela, but the Second Amendment, 2A, protest in Virginia presents a new tactic opportunity that can be used to counteract any color revolution. Outside the West. One thing that is key to understanding color revolutions, CR, is that as it stands today they are always orchestrated by the West to make regime change in the non-West due to their financial and nearly total media domination. No matter how many people label the mainstream media as dinosaur or quote their terrible ratings, the 24-hour news cycle still creates a dominant narrative for current events in the public's mind internationally. And this is why the color revolution tactic only works one way. The Western mainstream media can turn any nobody politician public figure into the legitimate leader of country X overnight. No one knew who Guaido was on Monday, but the West was sure he was the only true voice of the Venezuelan people on Tuesday. The same goes for the overwhelming support for anyone opposed to Putin like Alexei Navalny, who if given the chance to run for president would surely get a low-end single-digit percentage. The mainstream media can make heroes and villains abroad, but this does not work in the opposite direction. When Jill Stein, a figure with the same relative level of popularity as Navalny if not more so, was thrown out of the 2016 debate when she tried to crash the party. No non-Western media could spin this into the catalyst for some sort of color revolution. If this would have happened in say Iran, then calls for the overthrow of the government would be heard from TV screens and Facebook memes around the world. Although the Russians are accused of meddling in the Yellow Vest protests, there is simply not enough Moscow media might to convince the French public that the Yellow Vesters are the new legitimate power, wag that dog, and get a full-scale color revolution completed. The French situation is a perfect breeding ground for a color revolution if it was in bad guy country X. The level of protests are massive, police brutality is rampant and documented, and they even have a color symbol, their vests. All the ingredients are there, but without being able to push the media narrative, no CR can or will happen in France. What this means is that for the foreseeable future the multipolar non-Western world, Russia, China, Iran etc., is always going to be on the defensive from CR tactics. There is however another major disadvantage that the multipolar world has: the type of people who go out to street protests are the type who support the monopolar world. The working masses of families with kids, the heartlanders across the globe, who are really the backbone of society, are far too tired busy to engage in color revolutions or protests of any kind, and when they do they are one-off and utter failures. The actual people who are most likely to protest with ribbons because of vague complaints like a lack of democracy or freedom are those emotional types with time on their hands and probably decent resources too. Not a bourgeois victimhood lifestyle teenagers and some hardcore professional activists are generally who you are going to find at CRs. The amount of people who are actual ideologies that push political agendas in their country are generally less than 1% of the population, combined with trendy kids who want to feel like they are accomplishing something by chanting "do not represent" the will of the working class majority. But as stated before, the mainstream media can convince even simple folk in country X that they do. And probably what is most important, the trendy people with free time are always inherently pro-Western. It is exactly the cosmopolitan urbanites in any country who are going to be pro-Western. Farmers and factory workers usually won't. The type of people who come out to a color revolution are the types who believe the US-EU hype, and are the willfully useful idiots that the media needs to create its narrative. And here is where the Virginia 2A protests come in. They, like the Yellow Vest protesters, were made up of those toiling masses also known as the silent majority. The same silent majority which the multipolar world wants to win with calls for tradition, populism and national sovereignty. Meaning, that ideologically the Second Amendment crowd's instincts are anti-color revolution even if they don't know what the term means. They are the kind of folks who cherish America as an idea and as part of their identity. They want their traditions and culture to remain intact, meaning that this is really the forces that the leadership of country X, that is under threat of color revolution, should use. This is a demonstration of just how strong the silent majority really is when it awakes from its slumber of fatigue. The local government was terrified and declared a state of emergency even before the protest began, and obviously, the SJW rats didn't dare show their faces against hundreds of armed old-school Americans. This show of force that didn't use any particular force is a shining example of how strong the people the multipolar order supposedly loves, and we can see how much they could halt some kind of anti-American CR. To an extent, this is what happened in Venezuela when Maduro was able to successfully rally thousands of supporters to march. If in Caracas the media had footage of massed government troops on the move, beating people with clubs, it would have fed into Maduro's downfall. But since the actual force that took over the streets were just working-class normies in bright t-shirts, there was not only the juicy footage to twist, the images proved to support Maduro's legitimacy. The real winner of this situation was Maduro's usage of the silent majority directly against the color revolutionaries. He showed a faith in his people, which is not felt in places like Russia or China. Despite the fact that the multipolar world stands on the side of tradition on populism, the big two dominant forces in this movement did not let their populaces take action like Maduro was wise enough to allow. If hordes of armed commoners like those at the Virginia protests showed up to the Maidan, it would never have succeeded. Instead, in Ukraine they stayed home as 40,000 protesters decided the destiny of 40 million people. Although China is accused of sending thugs from the mainland, if they were to send waves of semi-armed hillbillies into Hong Kong, the issue would be resolved in a day. The simple fact is that those who are on the multipolar side of today's new Cold War, if given the chance to fight on the streets, will win that fight every time. They are the side with the most to lose, the most anger to vent, the most testosterone, the most love for their own way of life, and who suffer the most from color revolutions. Maduro demonstrated that organizing the peasantry, even with just their fists and improvised weapons, was enough to defeat years of color revolution prep, especially since his masses did not look like soldiers in disguise. He had the legit support of countless thousands of normal people. The Virginia two-way protest showed that the trendies, who are the poster children of CR movements, will go absolutely silent the second there is a threat of real violence. Antifa is happy to use their black bloc against one man in a MAGA hat, but when it comes to actually dying for their beliefs, they sit at home. Word warfare, Twitter terrorism and media manipulation are the strengths of the monopolar world. But ultimately the people that this system breeds are not willing to fight, in the direct literal sense, for their values, and will lose through preemptive capitulation in the face of actual direct force. If those who claim they are fighting for a multipolar world order do not have more faith in their populace, then they will become Yanukovych's and not Maduro's. Footage of government troops fighting protesters can spell doom for any leader. While the same direct action being taken by thousands of uniformless out-of-shape factory workers acting semi-independently feeds the mainstream media nothing, and in fact strengthens one's own legitimacy, it shows the people are on your side. To be clear, this is not a call for violence. In fact, it is quite the opposite. Some of the most deadly events in human history have been revolutions. Meaning, that if someone really cares about the lives of commoners, they should not advocate for overthrowing governments, but for incremental change. If the Maidan had been solved by rednecks smashing up the camps in Kiev, yes, some people would have died, perhaps tens or hundreds at the most. But to date thousands have been killed and millions have suffered thanks to the successful color revolution of 2014. The war in the Donbass still continues many years on. Even if you loved the ideas the Yeltsin tried to push on Russia, the fact is that the shattering of the Soviet Union caused millions of deaths. Reform of the Soviet Union would have been far preferable from a humanitarian standpoint. If we think about the great revolutionary periods in human history, in France, Russia, China, etc., they were all followed by grand-scale violence and counter-revolutionary crackdown. Using the silent majority to block upcoming CR tactics is a far more humane solution than it may sound on the surface. If the multipolar world wants to survive, it has to activate its silent majority to protect itself from color revolution tactics. Rise or die. We are anonymous, we are legion, we do not forgive, we do not forget. You know the rest. End transmission.